Welcome back, Richard. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I'm eagerly anticipating our conversation today. Because
Something we've talked about a few times, huh?
yes, actually, we have found ourselves sort of sitting in our offices several mornings this week,
Mhm.
talking about this particular topic. Probably in part because last week we talked about, some of our concerns. We could just call them our concerns
Right.
about what happens when people are put in charge of making decisions, especially medical decisions, when they don't really have a background or experience in medicine, and they don't have experience and background in science and
Right.
doing research and those kinds of things. We talked about that as it relates to some of the things that have been coming out recently about autism, and there's been even some more things that have come out over the past week as it relates to autism and just some
This week's
um,
this week's bombshell was
early circumcision that can increase the risk um, for autism. And again, there's not really any research that supports the claim. Um, and we again trying to recognize the difference between between correlational data and causal data. Um, but we're not going to talk about autism today, even though we could go into that
well,
again.
but there's a kernel here, and that is that when Kennedy, I'm talking about Robert Kennedy Jr., head of HHS, when he makes a statement like there's some connection, these people have a voice, they have influence. And when you make those statements, they're going to have some effect on a large number of people. And
Right.
so suddenly you introduce the idea that a safe drug, a safe medication like Tylenol, suddenly could be a problem. And so when people in authority speak, we say they have a big megaphone, they have a big
Right.
voice. And the same thing is happening in all areas of our life right now.
Right.
It's happening in healthcare, it's happening in education, it's happening at the Department of Defense. We saw the generals dragged into Washington. So these people have a very loud voice, and
Right.
when they speak, people listen.
Right.
But we have to be very careful about what we're listening to.
Right. And if we're not careful, we start sort of buying a bill of goods that we think are sound because if we're very honest and open, we can say that, on the surface it sounds good. And
Right.
many people that I've talked to about all of the issues regarding autism and
Mhm.
immunizations and what's happening with all of that, and vaccinations in general, many people are just saying, well, at least somebody's looking at it. At least somebody's doing something. And what happens is that when some of these folks have such big megaphones, as you said, people start to listen to them, and because they sound good on the surface, and because we think, hey, at least somebody's looking at this, and so they must have some information that we don't have,
Mhm.
people start going along with it. And so today, instead of talking more about the medical side of things, we're going to talk about the educational side of it and what's happening in our education system where things have shifted. We often refer to it as the pendulum shifting
Right.
from one extreme where teachers and schools make all of the decisions unilaterally, and nobody else has any input,
Right.
to the other extreme where parents or others who really don't have any experience or education as it relates to how to educate kids, they make all the decisions. And that is sort of the direction we are in right now. And we're going to talk about some of our concerns related to that because education has for a long time been a very easy target when it comes to some of these issues.
That's right. I can remember back in the 60s and 70s, we were criticizing public education because it's not an easy task. What our country set out to do in educating all children, and now many countries have universal education, but ours was one of the first to
Mhm.
say we're going to educate everybody.
Right,
That is a formidable challenge,
right.
and we usually fall short of our goals. But there, but today there is a there's a new type of criticism that has seeped into the conversation, and it's causing us a great deal of concern.
Mhm.
As you said, public education has always been an easy target, and there are a couple of reasons for this. One is that everyone's been to school.
Right.
But just because you attended school doesn't mean you know how to do it. Many people believe that, well, I know how it works. I know it worked for me. I know it's going to work for my children. Um, you might know what worked for you. You might know what was best for you. You might have very strong beliefs about how education should work. But just because you went to school doesn't make you an expert in educational policy.
Right. It's the same thing. You can equate this to anything. I mean, how many
Right.
people sit at home and you're watching soccer or football and you
Yeah.
think, how did he not make that catch? You got to make that catch. But at the same time, you have no idea what it feels like to be running at full pace and a ball being thrown at you, 60 miles an hour with somebody
Right.
right on your back and you have to catch it.
Right.
You know, so we think that we know these things because we've watched it or we've maybe even played before. But when it comes to the actual implementation of it, actually doing it, most
Mhm.
of us have no idea what it takes to do these things. And so
Right.
education is a great example because uh, you know, most people have no idea what it is like to try to teach 20, 30 kids anything, any
Right.
particular topic.
Right. And we do. We say, well, I can do a better job than that. I know how
Right.
to do this. I know how to fix this. No, you probably don't. I mean, look, you and I, between the two of us, probably have 80 years worth of experience in
hmm
education. I wouldn't for a moment think that I could go in and run not a school district. I couldn't even run a school. I couldn't do what a principal does.
I have a master on my way to get my doctorate. I had earned a master's degree and an education specialist degree. My
Right.
education specialist degree is in curriculum and instruction.
Right. Right.
There is still no way that I could manage a middle school classroom.
Right. That's right. We don't have that expertise, and we're in the field.
Right.
So that's problem number one. The second problem is that elected officials historically believe that they know how to improve schools. Okay. Um, and so um, once again, these elected officials typically don't have a degree in education.
Right. Most of them
Okay.
have, most of them are attorneys. They may have a political science degree or something like that. That
Mhm.
doesn't equate to the same thing as managing a classroom.
Right. And over the years, we can go back to the 2000. We can go back 25 years. We can go back as many years as you want.
Right.
But elected officials, and I think it began with Reagan, was the first
Yeah.
time that the federal government weighed into education. Um, and since then, we've seen different presidents offer different solutions. Um, but many of these have been disasters. I mean, No
Right.
Child Left Behind. I mean, it
hmm
was a catastrophe for most
Right.
districts. Common Core, remember Common? Many. And this whole idea of school choice, let's have magnet schools or let's have charter schools. And now today we have vouchers. So elected officials tend to offer what they believe are solutions to the problem, but most of them have ended in disaster.
And again, I think that part of it is that when we just look at the surface level
Right,
challenges or problems, we think, oh, this is a simple problem that we can solve. You know what? It would be fantastic. So many problems would go away if every child was reading on grade level by third grade.
right.
And that was the crux of No Child Left Behind.
There's no child left behind. Right.
But when you do, but that's I'm just going to call it a naive belief
Right.
because we know statistically that a good portion of kids will not read at grade level
Mhm.
at all, much less by third grade. And
Right.
so when you look at the science and the statistics and just the reality of it,
Mhm.
that's something that could look really great on the surface, and what may be true for most students,
Mhm.
80% or so of students,
Right.
doesn't necessarily jive with everyone. And what that has done is over the years, it has led to what we see as the third problem. That is, we keep changing our focus on where the criticism falls.
Right.
You know, for a long time, the criticism was focused on educational issues and behavior. And again, that's where we got to No Child Left Behind, and some of those other ideas of, well, if we just take away recess and
Mhm.
we put
Yeah.
kids and we give them extra reading time, then they're
Mhm.
going to read on grade level by third grade.
Right.
And we demonstrated that's not true.
Right. And baked into No Child Left Behind is let's reward schools that do a good job and let's
Right.
punish schools that do a bad job. It was another catastrophe
Right.
because it was we called it the Matthew effect. The good schools got better, got more money, and the schools who were struggling with underachieving students got less. It wasn't because they had bad teachers, it's that they had children with learning and behavior problems.
Right.
And so all of these efforts, though well-intended, really amount to aspirational goals, not realistic goals,
Right.
and they're not being developed by the people who know how to do this.
Right.
Teachers knew, people in education knew that there was no way that every kid was going to be reading at grade level by third grade.
Right.
Everybody knew that.
Right.
No teacher, no administrator would ever have promulgated that as a policy because they knew it wasn't possible.
Right. I was in graduate school when No Child Left Behind came out in the early 2000s. And I remember that almost immediately the joke was, and it's unfortunate that it was a joke, but the joke was how we how we were going to figure out where we would put student parking lots in middle schools,
Right.
because it would take some of these students so long, because the idea was they will keep repeating third grade until they're reading on grade level,
Right.
that by the time they got to middle school, they would be driving.
Right.
And so we would need student parking at the middle schools.
Right.
And that was almost immediately as soon as this came out. So, yeah, educators knew that that wasn't going to work.
And the problem that we're trying to solve was that kids were graduating from high school and couldn't read.
Mhm.
And so they said, well, we got to fix this problem. So they said, well, what should we do? Well, let's stop them in third grade. Let's not let them progress after third grade. And it was sort of black humor, but we were saying, well, there are some kids who are going to be in third grade for 3 or 4 years,
Mhm.
which means they're going to be 16 in middle school and they're going to be able to drive to middle school.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a good intention. It was an aspirational goal, but it wasn't practical. And no educators knew that that was not going to happen. Um, but what's happening today is that the public policy makers, the elected officials who drive this decision making, presidents and governors and state legislatures. The criticism today is very, very different because it just has begun to feel as though the goal of the criticism was to destroy the public school system.
Right.
It wasn't meant to improve the system. It was meant to take it apart, to dismantle it.
Right.
The US, I don't like rankings, but the US is ranked first in college and university teaching and research. Okay,
Right.
we are first in the world in college. Everybody wants to come here because we have such a good system. We're ranked about 31st in K to 12 education. And yet what we're seeing today is we're dismantling both as quickly as we can.
Right.
Uh, do they need, so the irony there is that we're dismantling the best and the one that's not so good. We're dismantling the whole thing.
Right.
As most of you know, the Department of Education has been shuttered. It's essentially been closed. And what's left
Mhm.
is being run by someone with no educational experience, no educational background. She's the head of the World Wrestling Federation. She has no background in education, doesn't care. But what's happening is it's someone who is, and like with the other departments, the Department of Education is now just handing out the current administration's rules and marching orders. So
Right.
this is what we want you to do. So go do this. But it has nothing to do with, very little to do with education. But it
Right.
feels like the goal is just to dismantle education.
Right. And so the conflict here is that the attacks, the people who are attempting to destroy
Mhm.
what feels like they're attempting to destroy the system are also the people who are in charge with fixing it.
Well,
So
that's
it's
the
like
iron.
it appears as though their solution to the problem is just to get rid of it.
Right. Let's just take it apart. Let's destroy it and it's happening at the federal level and the state level.
Right.
Okay. Let's demolish this thing because it's not working.
Right.
It may work and it doesn't seem to be working very well
Right.
because today's critics, and the other part of the criticism is the content of their criticism. And in our state, we hear teachers are woke. The educate schools are woke. They're places. I have nobody has any idea what that means.
Right.
It has something to, I don't know. But it's not, we're not talking about reading and math, and we're not
Right.
talking about behavior, and we're not talking about how do we make things better. We're talking about schools are woke. Okay.
Right. Schools are
And again,
woke and students are being brainwashed and
how
we're getting rid of books and we're getting rid of classes, we're getting rid of, you know, even history books are being sort of
re,
censored to remove important parts of history because we
right,
don't want to address those issues or realize those issues. And it's so difficult because again, instead of, like you said, instead of focusing on, what the problem really is, and we agree that the education system needs a lot of work. We
oh,
we need to
absolutely.
we need to revise some things. We need to look at what's happening and make some changes.
Right,
But the changes that are needed have nothing to do with teachers being woke and what books are in the library and that kids are being brainwashed and there's just the reports the fallacy of you send your son to school in the morning and he comes home a girl in the afternoon.
yeah.
Um, it's just instilling and breeding fear
Hmm.
that says again, well, hey, at least somebody's trying to do something about the education system because we all admit that some changes need
Right,
to happen, but at least somebody's doing something, disregarding the idea that that something that's being done is causing more harm than
right,
it's solving, than problems it's solving.
right. That's right. And and the criticism is being leveled at the teachers who
Mhm.
are doing the hard work. I mean, we're criticizing the very people that we want to devote to our children.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, and we're banning books and we're telling librarians that if you don't do this, you're going to lose your job. And if you talk about this, you're going to lose your job. And if you don't do it this way, you're going to lose your job. We're going to take your certificate. So there's this climate of fear and accusation because the discussion is not about making education better. It's about everything else. It's about
Right.
everything other than education.
And the where this is going, and we knew that we were going to have to split this podcast up into two episodes because we're kind of getting to the point that we're going to really tackle in the next podcast. But what all of this has led to is the idea of, well, if we can't trust teachers, we can't trust administrators, and we know that we don't believe that schools are doing what they're supposed to do, what we should do is we should put parents and parent groups in charge.
Right.
We should put them in positions where parents and these other groups, where they're going to make some of these decisions. Um, there's this push for parents to be able to make more decisions as it relates to their kids' education, and that we have the Parent Bill of Rights, and we have, parents should have, you mentioned school choice and those things earlier. We're creating this idea that parents know best when it comes to how to educate kids.
Well, no, and that's what the politicians are saying.
Right,
They're saying parents know best.
right,
Parents know what is best for their children, and they should be allowed to make these decisions.
right. And so going, as you said a moment ago, so we look at what's happening here in Florida, for example, and Florida oftentimes gets is the brunt of a lot of jokes around the country, I think, sometimes because of some of the decisions that are made. But
Mhm.
recently, as an example, our the medical director for Florida, the Florida Surgeon General, made the decision, along with our governor, that we will get rid of immunization, vaccination mandates for schools, meaning
Mhm.
that parents can choose whether or not their kids are going to be immunized before they go to school. They don't have to be anymore. That's the parent's choice.
Right,
Um, so as we look at that, again, that has nothing to do with education,
right.
but we're going to put parents in this position where they can make these decisions. We don't let parents make other decisions. We don't let parents choose what books their kids read. We let these other groups say that no kids are allowed to read these books. So we don't let individual parents make those choices. We don't let parents make choices as it relates to medical care for a lot of their kids. Whether they need gender affirming care or anything like that. We don't let them make those decisions, but we're going to let them make the decision about who's vaccinated and who's not. And
Mhm.
we're not even going to be worried. And I'm paraphrasing a little bit from the Surgeon General, but basically said we're not even going to worry about what influence or impact this is going to have on communities. We're not even going to prepare hospitals or medical professionals with what influx they may see as it relates to some of these illnesses. We're just going to let parents make these choices, and we'll see what happens.
Right, right. But it sounds good.
It
When you say
does.
things like, we're going to give parents control of this, that's a nice soundbite. That sounds like a good idea. It's like every kid will read by the end of third grade. That sounds terrific. Okay.
Right. Who
But
who would argue that? Who would say,
right.
no, that's a terrible idea?
Or no, we don't want the parents to be in. No, nobody's going to argue that. So it sounds terrific, but all of these cute little sound, I don't mean to be pejorative here, but all these sound bites that sound really good
Hmm.
have to be translated into policy decisions. And
Hmm.
that's where this all of these things start to fall apart. So it sounds great to put parents in charge, but um, that by putting parents in charge, you are taking away authority
Right.
from the people who know how to do it.
Right.
I mean, so you're saying, let's take these people who don't really know how to do this and let's put them in charge, but let's get rid of the people who really know how to do this.
We,
Now, parents may know you may know what's best for your child, but schools are responsible for all children, and that's what we have to remember. You may know what's best from your religious perspective. You may want your religion to be represented in a public school. Well, the sep let's put aside the whole idea of the separation of church and state. You want your Ten Commandments, you want your prayers, you want your religion in the school. But the public schools are responsible for all religions. They're
right.
all represented. And
Right.
so whose prayer do we use? Whose Ten Commandments do we use? Whose Bible do we use?
And we can't even say that we can't even just hold on to the idea that, okay, well, there are many who say that, the United States is a Christian nation and that it should be
Right,
Christian. Okay, that's great. Which denomination?
right,
Because different denominations present things differently. Different denominations, want these things presented in different ways.
Right.
They have very different beliefs.
Right.
And so, who chooses which one we go with?
Right.
And so, again, a parent may know what they want their kid to learn,
Hmm.
but do you really want a teacher who you may not know their background?
Hmm.
Do you really want them teaching your kid their religious perspective,
Right.
but you don't want them to teach about health?
Right.
You don't want them to learn, you don't want them to talk to them about, how to take care of, other parts of your life, like how to take care of your body, how to, do deal with relationships. You don't want them to talk about those things,
Right.
but you're going to put, you know, in the hands of teachers, you want them to be able to talk about the religious perspective, which again may or may not, it could be Christian, but it may or may not be consistent with the way that you believe in your home.
Right.
I don't, it, that dissonance is so confusing to
Mhm.
me that it's just so hard to reconcile.
Right. It's like, well, we should return prayer into schools.
Right,
But once again, that sounds terrific. Okay. But what prayer? Whose prayer? What if a kid doesn't want to pray? What if a teacher doesn't want to pray? You
right,
know, these are complicated policy decisions. And so, what sounds good in a soundbite for a politician running for office, and they've started running for political office, and some of the ads are absolutely grotesque
right,
because they're talking about men changing. Your girls are going to have to watch men change in the restroom and use the women's restroom. It is absolutely grotesque what these ads are doing, these
right.
political ads this year,
But
because
again, they're just trying to instill fear
here, right.
so that parents, become more confrontational when dealing with and working with their teachers and their schools.
Right. And so, what this comes down to, this fourth problem of parent involvement, is who owns public education? I'm going to use the word own. Who owns public education?
Right,
Is it owned by the people with the experience and the knowledge to do it as well as possible? Well, if that's the case, then those who are responsible for making it work
right,
also has to have the authority. Now, parents are not responsible for the education of all children,
right,
but then so they shouldn't have the authority to be making decisions. It's the teachers and the principals who have the responsibility. They should have the authority. You
right,
can't take their authority away if you're going to give them the responsibility. The
right.
only way you can have responsibility is if you have the authority to implement. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So imagine again, you're responsible for teaching this kid algebra or
Right.
history, but somebody else makes the decision about what you're teaching. Somebody else makes the decision about what you can say when you're teaching it, and
Mhm.
somebody else makes a decision about what the tests look like and what the standard. It's your ability to teach that material shrinks
Mhm.
considerably the more
Right.
that other people who, again, have no idea about scope and sequence of
Right.
how to teach skills and the curriculum and how all of that stuff works. These people have no idea how that process functions,
Right.
but yet they're making the decisions.
Right. And where this leads ultimately, as we close this section down, is that we value the way elite private schools work and how effective they are
Right,
and how good they are at educating children. Well, if you send, there are some very, very good private schools. There's some in Lakeland, but Tampa has some really good private schools. In those elite private schools, parents don't make decisions about curriculum or discipline or
right,
what class your child will or will not attend or what rules they will and will not follow. I'll go to this class, but I'm not going to go to this class. And I'm going to do this assignment, but this one I don't like, so I'm not going to do it. It's against my religion or something. No, no, no. Um, these you will do what the school says you're going to do. This is our
right,
school. This is what we do. And there are no investigations triggered against the faculty or the students or like there are in public schools because the parents are not part of the decision-making process. There might be an advisory board to talk about stuff, but the decisions are made by the administration
Right.
and the faculty. And that's why those places work, because the people who have the responsibility also have the authority.
Absolutely. So again, the overall picture here is that, schools, public schools are charged with the task of educating all children, not just
Right.
your child, all children. And for them to accomplish that, teachers and administrators, they have to be the ones to make these decisions
Mhm.
because they're the ones responsible for it. And,
And
and
it,
they've been trained to do it. They have gone through the training to know how to do it. And if a teacher or an administrator isn't fitting the bill, then there is a system in place to deal with that. There is additional training, there is, moving and shifting of responsibilities, and that is fixed, that is addressed. We don't have to move in such a direction that parents make all the decisions. And in the next podcast, we're going to talk more about that
right.
because what happens when parents are in charge of making all those decisions and parents have that role. We're going to talk more about some of those consequences in the next podcast.
Right, right, because these teachers and administrators have to make these complex, complicated decisions daily. They can't do it in a climate of fear and intimidation. You can't be standing over them, judging every single word, every deed, every intention. You can't create, and that's what's been created. This criticism from all corners has created a climate of fear and intimidation. So we'll talk about that in the next podcast.
Absolutely. So until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, and forget to be afraid.